In February of 2024, I started working on remaking the Toy Story 2 game from the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 in Unreal Engine 5, and as of this month, the first level is in a completable state. Hey everyone, I'm Zachary, and I'm a professional systems and technical game designer. For this video, we got a new room done, so stick around to see the new art there. There's still a ton of work left to get done in this game, so let's talk about what we got finished over the last 30 days, and then we'll talk about what's next. The first major update was to the lighting. I actually updated the lighting about 4 times this month, trying to figure out what works best for optimization and making the level look good, using a mix of point lights, rect lights, and spotlights. This is really interesting for those who don't know, so let me explain what each of these types of lights are. A point light is a standard light source where it emits light in a sphere direction. The spotlight is like an actual spotlight where the light source is coming from a specific source going in a specific direction. It has a variable to set the range of the size of the emitter as well. The final light source here is a rect light, which is kind of like a square light, however it actually shares much more in common with softbox lighting, which creates really soft edges and looks phenomenal. It is the most expensive of these types of lights though, and when I say expensive I mean optimization wise. Anyways, I placed more lights around the level while setting a few assets to not cast shadows, such as this ceiling light. This is because the shadow from it actually looks pretty weird in the level. One issue with the level in the last video is I used post-processing and the skylight to set a minimum brightness to the level. This made Andy's room look amazing without a substantial number of lights needed, but the attic and the basement were too bright, so I created triggers that would lerp between the brightness of the skylight to a different value depending on the room. By the way, lerping is basically a function to update a value over time based on a time frame. And then I went back and updated all the lights one more time to make this look perfect. And then I went back to updating the trigger values, and then I went back to lights again to update them as well. And this just went back and forth for a while until it was much closer to what I was looking for. It still isn't perfect and some rooms aren't done because the art hasn't been done yet, but it is much closer to matching the visual of the game in my head. I can't wait to get more of this done, but I need to move on because I've already spent 2 weeks on lighting alone. By the way, if you're curious how I got into game development, I actually graduated as valedictorian with a degree in game development, which you can obtain as well with this video's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University. SNHU has one of the largest accredited non-profit online degree offerings in the country, including degrees for game development and game art. Your courses are actually taught by faculty with a real-world experience, so you'll have the opportunity to connect with professionals in the industry. With the game development degree program, you will learn skills such as programming languages, game design principles, production and testing techniques, and game systems development. And fun fact, game systems design and development is what I specialize in. Also, SNHU's online tuition rates are some of the lowest in the nation, making it radically affordable. And on top of that, SNHU was actually voted one of the country's most innovative universities by US News and World Report. And when you graduate, SNHU will still be there to help you begin your job hunt. So go ahead and click the link in the description to learn how to get started with Southern New Hampshire's University Game Development Program. I'm going to keep this section pretty short right now, but I started messing with the exterior environment a little bit, though I will say that I undid most of the work by this point. I'll explain why in a moment. First, I added a landscape and then shifted the ground around the basement so it wouldn't go inside the house. Then I added a few assets from the backyard level, such as the fence to the backyard that you can see out of the window. After laying a grass texture down, I had started actually adding a lot of grass and tree foliage around just to test what it would look like through the windows. This isn't actually accurate to the level though, so I ended up removing them all for now. At this point, I wanted to add the Hot Wheel for Buzz on the grind rails in this level. Remember, I'm adding Hot Wheel tracks as grind rails in the level to speed up the pacing of the level. If you look at this grind rail in the basement, it actually lets you escape the area much more quickly rather than spending 20 seconds jumping upstairs just pushing the A button. This will get much more polished as I do more on the project, but essentially there is always one Hot Wheel in the level, and when I land on a track, I snap the Hot Wheel to Buzz's feet. Then, when Buzz leaves the track, the car is detached from Buzz and set out of bounds. Again, this isn't super polished, but it works as intended. And by the way, if you notice how the car goes on the track of this part, it's actually just the fault of how I move Buzz along the track. I set him at a set height above the track piece, but I don't take direction into consideration. It's not a difficult fix, but I just haven't done it yet. All the art in this basement is actually old. We've actually updated this. Let's check that out. Alright, let's look at this new art, and the first thing you're going to notice is the new ooze. It is much more oozy now. You can see our new chemical spill for one, which has the hazardous waste texture on it, and there's also some liquid still kind of spilling out of it. This new chemical spill is much more oozy green looking. And then I bumped up the emissive to light almost the entire room with it, along with those yellow lights. I think it helps a lot. Yeah, we have these just standard hanging shelves that we have in the rest of the house. We may change these shelves slightly to match a little bit closer to the original, because the original they had like long bars into the wall that went down. Cardboard boxes in here for one, which have the kind of dirty effect that the attic box has. Not that, the garage box has. And then we also have a new palette, which I kind of like the style of quite a bit. I think it looks really nice. We have these new nails in here. These were actually from when we created the attic. And again, like something I've mentioned before, is it'd be fun if you could like ground pound and these would go slightly further into the ground, and then you would get like some kind of reward for it. One thing you'll notice is the basement actually doesn't have that many different assets. This is actually probably the easiest room to create for all of the art. We have these lights, which are quite different in design from the original. So we may actually change these and give them some kind of like glass cover to more closely resemble the original game. I think that'll actually be better for it overall. But you can see you can climb between these ropes just fine, no issue. They look pretty good overall. I don't know what that yellow line is, but it could be something wrong with the mesh slightly. We do have our new brick texture in here, although I think we're gonna end up going, I think we're gonna update this again. We updated it from last month, and I think we're actually gonna go somewhere in between of these two. If you hadn't seen yet, we actually have also modeled the whole room before, and like this lattice here, I think looks really good. I think I prefer it to the metal chain link lattice that was here. This wooden one looks really nice. We definitely like wood in this game. I think it's like a really good texture for Andy's house. We have our new moving boxes. We have a small, medium, and a large. I can't push the large right now because I just brought these assets in. I didn't verify it worked, so the mesh is just slightly not compatible, so it just requires some finagling to make that work. Here we are, and yeah, this is much brighter than it was originally. But yeah, I think this looks really good. And this Hot Wheel track, I think I'm gonna have this Hot Wheel track actually be built once you collect the token. Someday in the future, I don't know how possible it is because of animation work, I'd love to have those little construction tykes that you rescue in the construction yard actually build it. Like you see smoke appear and it like gets built, and this saves you a ton of time from having to go up the stairs, because here you are. Whoa. Now last month I said the garage was almost done, but we did add a little bit more detail. So we did finish the car almost. This is basically done. It needs a bottom. The windshield is obviously still a placeholder, but because we haven't modeled the inside and we're not sure if we're going to. Also, I also just think that it didn't render correctly in Unreal Engine. I just brought this in here, so I haven't had time to fix anything, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like a darker tint than this. We have also added some hanging tools from these swing bars. So we have two different electrical outlets here that are on these. We can swing past these. And then on here, you can see we actually have a saw blade. I'm gonna move this to the one right next to it. That way it's not three in a row that have something and three in a row that don't. Kyle did also provide a hammer, but I actually didn't like how it fit on here. And so it's small enough to where I actually just made it kind of be on the ground and Buzz can walk over it. All right, and here's our other hammer. So I put two in this level, one you walk over and one that's just kind of leaning against the wall, just to add a little bit more detail. Again, I think we're gonna change this brick texture. This one looks actually more low res than the last one. So it definitely is a higher resolution texture regardless, but I also just think if we're gonna go with brick, it may actually just have to be modeled, which would be a huge headache. And so we're gonna have to figure something else out for that. I know it doesn't seem like as much as usual, but that's all of the assets that we got done this month. Make sure you check out our video next month as well, because we are going to have collectibles done, and we're also going to have at least one more room completely done. I do want to mention that I do want to start working on a custom level on stream, and I want to take suggestions from the community for this. We'll start out by charting out the level flow and blocking out the level with primitives. If you want to help make this level, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss when I go live in a week or two for this. We're really trying to hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year. My next feature was actually a super simple one, and it was the boiling pot in the kitchen. I made a blueprint for the pot, and I also created a basic projectile blueprint that can be reused with other objects. I then added the projectile movement component to the blueprint and a basic sphere. The sphere itself is actually pretty simple. We just verify that Buzz has been hit by it and then apply a set amount of damage. However, the projectile movement component has a really cool function called suggest projectile velocity, where all we need to do is put in the start location and end location of where the sphere should start and end at. Then we put a launch speed, and this will provide us with a vector 3 velocity variable to make the object follow that path. There's also this boolean here for favor high arc that basically makes the ball shoot more up rather than a horizontal path if that is what you're looking for. This made the system work really well. At this point, we basically just make the projectile spawn randomly between every 1 to 3 seconds, and I haven't looked at super closely at the original game, so this may be updated because it may not actually be accurate, but I'll verify that at a later time and correct this as needed. Now, we're going to talk about enemies that I worked on. This will get pretty technical, even though the AI in this game are really simple. They could be just straight up programmed if needed. However, Unreal Engine has a tool for making AI development less convoluted called behavior trees. I'll kind of explain how this works at a basic level because this isn't a tutorial. And plus, I only learned how to use this system a couple weeks ago anyway, so I'm not the best person to teach this right now. We create this behavior tree, then set the AI to use this for behavior. For the copter robot, we have the selector node that will go to the correct path if the paths have conditions, or it will go in order if they do not. The path will go left if the enemy has not spotted Buzz, where it will follow a set path. If the copter enemy does see Buzz, it will get close enough to the player, then fire projectiles at him. He does have a cooldown for 3 seconds after shooting to make sure he isn't rapid firing at Buzz. As for how we know that the enemy has spotted Buzz, we use a pawn sensing component, which is a built-in vision and hearing system with Unreal Engine. Currently, I've only added vision to the enemies, not hearing, but with that, we can adjust the sight radius and peripheral vision angle that works best for this enemy. And then, on these events, we can just add on-see pawn event, which will fire this event when the enemy spots Buzz. I will say that AI behavior trees also use a blackboard, but we're not going to go too deep into those. I'll say they are essentially a way to set variables on a behavior tree, and we'll leave it at that though. It isn't that interesting. Also, to get enemies moving, I did set up a navigation mesh, which is a baked map that the AI can use to know where they are allowed to move. I didn't know this before I set it up, but enemies don't like this if they're flying, so currently the flying enemy moves with the nav mesh down on the ground. I'll fix this later with a smarter flying AI, however it does work well with other enemies that are grounded. The jumping enemy named Jumper uses the projectile component we talked about earlier to determine where he is allowed to jump on the nav mesh. Here is his behavior tree, but honestly it isn't that much more interesting than the flying enemy. And now we move on to the level's boss, 10 Robot. I haven't quite finished him yet, but I did get a lot of his behavior from the original game coded. He just isn't using it yet, but his behavior tree is certainly more complicated than the other enemies. But before we dive into this, I did set up his dialogue, and I also created a reusable blueprint with a trigger that can activate a specified dialogue. This trigger activates the boss's dialogue, then begins the fight, which is tied into the mission system to kick the quest off. Now that we know that, if we go back to the behavior tree, we will see that his first branch has conditions that check that the boss isn't dead or fighting. This makes him just hang out for a while. The second branch is for when you start the fight, where it goes down and makes sure the charge hasn't been activated 3 times yet. Once it charges 3 times, he then has to cool down. And wait, what's this? Phase 1, I guess you'll have to check out the next videos to see. Now, while the boss doesn't actually work quite yet, as his code is still a bit broken, once you defeat him, it does change the quest state and spawn the pizza token, which means that this level is technically completable in the intended way for the first time. You can give Ham 50 coins, find Bo Pete's sheep, find the hidden token, and beat RC in the race. Once we fully wrap up these features, then it's just tons of polish, and that's adding sound effects, cinematic camera shots for dialogue, particle effects, UI, most of the animations, 2 more rooms of art for collectibles, the level select, and oh my gosh, wow, there's actually still a lot left to do. But we're getting there. I'm not bringing on this project, and I'm deeply passionate about this remake. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my content and this game I'm making. It's a lot of fun. This has actually been one of the most challenging months that I've had to get content done because I've been dealing with a ton of server issues between Perforce and Linode. Anyways, y'all take care now.